we've had a lot of unpaid labor, and we've had to have dual roles now in our current economy of both working outside the home and inside the home. I think there's been studies that women tend to do like an additional 40 some hours of unpaid labor within families and stuff like that. When they're going to be exposed to more of the digital online prediction market type things and the quick and fast, what's the next thing that's going to happen that you can bet on immediately, they're going to be very prone to finding just some kind of emotional, like, that felt good.
Today's guest is Kitty M. She shares her story of gambling addiction and recovery, and she has a ton of interesting perspectives that I hope you can resonate with and enjoy. But before we dive into that, I have just one favor to ask from you. There's so many of you that watch this channel regularly, but you haven't yet hit that subscribe button. If you could do me the favor of subscribing, then my promise to you in return is that I'll continue to work hard each and every day to spread the message that gambling addiction is real. So what's your name? What do you do?
I'm Kitty Martz, and I do a lot of different things with folks that have experienced gambling harm. I'm the executive director of Voices of Problem Gambling Recovery, which is out of Oregon. And one of the best parts of my job is that I get to do advocacy work that relates to helping inform and educate around gambling harm, public and legislators.
That's awesome. What made you want to do that work?
When I was in treatment, I had a counselor. I'm an agnostic person, or atheist, and I was struggling with the spiritual parts of 12 steps that a lot of us that have addiction get referred to. And it was mentioned to me that if I wasn't able to get my arms around some kind of spirituality or deity, that I could perhaps picture my life having some meaning, and that could be the thing that was greater than me. And that was a big turning point to think, what would meaning be? Like, where is my worth, and what can my life result in that relates to reducing suffering? So as much as I like working with people one-on-one that have gambling challenges, I feel a calling to try to impact as many people as possible in the future, because I have a lot of concerns that we're really looking at an epidemic, gambling-wise.
I have the same kind of mindset of wanting to impact as many people as you can with your time. And that's why this conversation is like the perfect one to have, because we both feel the same way. And as you just mentioned, we're trending towards what might become an epidemic. Where do you see gambling heading in the future? Like, what practically will it look like in America?
We often talk about, those of us that work in this industry, of like, look across the pond, that Europe is several years ahead of us. We know that once there's more access to gambling, which is basically digital handheld, that we can do it on our phones. There's not a stop and end time. It's easy to lose track of the money, kind of decurrencyifies it. It's easy to do it quietly, just under the dinner table or restroom, anywhere. And so that level of accessibility is making the harm a lot greater. And operators have created this pretty effective narrative that the problem is the people that choose to gamble. The onus is put on those individuals, with really not much thought put to who those people are and what their unique experiences or genetics or lots of things that make specific circumstances for those people more prone to experience this addictive behavior. So I see something that could happen is that the folks who we're meant to take care of as a community, as a society, to lift each other up, are going to be the people that suffer the most. And I think that there's going to be not much government regulation, at least in the United States, on a federal level, but that the operators have been looking across the pond and seeing what kinds of things have happened in the countries that have had online digital handheld gambling for some time. And they're learning from that very quickly, with the level of technology improvements we've had. So I think there's going to be a lot of targeted advertising. I think that's going to affect people that are very quickly going to get very addicted to gambling, and that it'll continue to be positioned as something that's a benefit. If that's lotteries that say this is going to, in the state I live in, schools. Well, I mean, other places have schools, and we do want schools. Is there somewhere else we can get that money that's not on the backs of the folks that put the most dollars into the revenue, which are the people that become addicted? I also see that folks that only have more of an economy-sized problem with gambling, and that's, I don't know, individuals that would go to Vegas a couple times a year, or once a month go to the beach, to a destination place, that those folks are going to have increased access, and that their gambling is going to turn in from a moderate issue to a more severe issue. So overall, when I say epidemic, I just think of that's where there's an exponential increase in the harm. And the numbers you hear of adults that are addicted to gambling on a severe level, like just to kind of round it off, everyone has kind of different numbers. But if we say 3% of adults in the US, does that sound reasonable?
That's actually one point that's always really bothered me, is the way that we report those numbers.
We do studies, we have different ways of measuring it, and folks that work in the field are like, oh, how now, brown cow? It is far higher than that. But to be conservative, let's say 3. It's been established that in the UK, where they've had digital handheld for almost a decade, it's like 9.2%. So that's an epidemic when something is multiplied by itself. And I think that's going to happen actually quite quickly. I think there's a lot happening, that people are suffering and looking for some relief, and specifically folks who are suffering more are going to be looking for some form of relief. I think our digital natives that have grown up somewhat self-medicating and not learning how to emotionally self-regulate in ways, I mean, I'm 56 and we could ride bikes and go for walks, and there were other things we learned to do as kids and have hobbies. Kids these days, I can't believe I say that, but they tend to play on computers and games and phones and things, and the way the brain works in processing the dopamine and the habit building that comes through that process, when it becomes monetized, I just think it's going to be bananas how much harm could come from that.
So you think that if we were to take the same kind of numbers that we see in the UK, that the gambling problem in America is about 3 times worse than people are saying it is?
It will be.
It will be.
Yeah. That when everyone has easy access to digital handheld and it's normalized. And I also think about that there's markets that operators are going to look at. I mean, there's certainly been sports gambling that's starting to attract educated young men is a target market that have some disposable income, and they typically also transition over to online casino, which is where the money's at. But there's women, and even in my age group, not super technological, not on the digital all the time, but maybe we have empty nest, or I don't know, perimenopausal, or just transition, or finding new meanings in our lives. What do we do with our time, or to feel good? And it's challenging to do the type of fun that you go out and are bad at something and take lessons and pay money and have the luxury, the privilege of going to a place to learn to do a thing that you eventually get good enough at that you feel some flow and it feels good. Whereas anyone can pick up their phone and push a few buttons and it feels really good. And so I think that the women are going to not go into online gambling through the same route that men did of sports gambling, but there's prediction markets now where it's just maybe kind of fun to look at who's going to win the next award for acting, or it's going to be quick and immediate things. What's the weather going to be like this afternoon? And we're going to be able to gamble on absolutely anything, and that immediacy of it makes it worse. The thinking we have any kind of skill at it is going to exacerbate it, that it's maybe a topic we know a little bit about we're going to want to gamble on. So I think that as much as like there's going to be whole other maybe documentaries made about how children are affected and the gamification of games.
Sure.
We can also look at how adults are going to be affected, and certainly games affect them too. Loot boxes are just an absolute massive market, and that's gambling built into just what's entertainment, and it's not regulated in any form.
No, and sometimes it's even more aggressively marketed than the gambling because of the fact that there's very few regulations on the gambling advertising, but there's zero on the free-to-play mobile gaming industry.
I don't know a lot about how AI and data gathering is happening, but I know that's where it's at, and I know there's heck of data about all of us out there. And so, when I think about like when we work in the field and we try things like saying, well, if you're going to gamble, just do it thoughtfully and make sure it's just entertainment money, and don't gamble for too long, or don't gamble more than you want to lose. And a lot of the folks that I've worked with say, like, that didn't really slow me down much, like that kind of responsible gambling education. So I also think we should be talking about, like, are you someone who probably shouldn't gamble at all? Do you have co-occurring alcohol use disorder, or mental health challenges, or did you have like a lot of trauma, or are you having a tough time right now in your life? Like that, we don't have people that are pregnant encouraged to just drink a little bit of alcohol. And in the same way as like public health measures, I think we should say, this is not for you if you're in one of these categories. And I don't see that happening. I, in fact, see what's going to happen is that online operators are going to figure out really savvy ways to target us in real time. We know that Kitty sometimes can't sleep and loses track of what she does scrolling online, and that would be a good time to maybe send a freebie or a spiff or a bonus or something. Or that when people are playing and starting to lose, of like, oh, Rob's kind of falling behind, let's keep him in the game. What's something that could come through that would sweeten that pot, or be loss disguised as a win, all those built-in tools. And without any regulation, that's going to happen. I also think that it's going to get increasingly competitive, and we can't say that the operators are necessarily at fault for doing this. They're responsible to their shareholders. There's no reason they should show the corporate and social responsibility of, like, we're going to be the most pious and have the most stringent policies in our marketing, to the degree that they then lose market share to a competitor. So are we going to have an honor system where they all get together and they're like, okay, this is just a line we're not going to cross, everybody put a hand in?
How do you define everybody?
Right? Like, everybody, it's the one operator that doesn't, that then has the strategic advantage, which is why I believe in government regulation to protect people. So where do we look to getting the government to want to have this be an important issue to help us? Like, how do we educate them? And I think that has to be a bottom line kind of thing. I think the money talks. And when we're able to have researchers point to that when gambling addiction increases, it increases healthcare costs, it increases crime and bankruptcy, and just lots of things that affect our community, productivity in the workplace, people needing to have services to be able to get by that otherwise would maybe be able to just go have a job, and it becomes a situation of just having an unwellness that they need care. And if we can get some funding to do research to then present, like, no, the facts are here, and bipartisan support could be found to sponsor bills to have just even the smallest iota of state regulation, but ideally federal, which I don't see happening. It's really hard to get federal regulation on this kind of thing. That would be great to move in that direction. What really seems to be happening is if you look at like prediction markets, there's one called Kashi, which I understand Donald Trump Jr. is now one of the big spokespeople for, and said, yeah, we used to think that this was nonsense and not a good idea, but now we're like, full steam ahead. Everybody hop on your prediction markets. It's really fun and really a good thing. And we tend to look at celebrity or people in positions of authority to guide us. And it's going to increasingly be attractive for celebrities to endorse products. I know you've told me before that some of the pay for people to endorse online gambling products and make it look like it's just something fun they do is massive.
Oh yeah.
Huge salaries for that.
Now, I mean, going back and kind of tying that up with something that you said in the beginning, right now, all the onus, if you have a problem, is on the player. So if you have a gambling problem, you give us a call, buddy. So, we can dive into what that means in a minute. But taking like the devil's advocate position, if I'm someone that just really likes doing it, I know it's not great for me, but I want to do it. I would hate the idea of a regulation coming in telling me what I can and can't do. What would you kind of say to that person? Just like, think of someone that's like maybe beginning to show signs and symptoms of problems, but they still love it.
Yeah.
If you were to tell them, nope, it's gone for you.
Yeah.
How would you want them to react? What would the conversation look like?
If I were to talk to that person, I mean, I think in the same way that we want public education, it's not behooving anyone to have a bunch of folks that aren't having good lives because they didn't get educations. Who's against education? In the same way that like veterans are kind of a bipartisan issue. Like of course we want to take care of our service members and retired service members. Gambling is going to be the same way. It is not going to be of benefit to just have the governor be off, like just everyone running amok, gambling in any form. And if there aren't regulations, like let's say, just for example, you're a young man and you like gambling online, would you like it if suddenly your deposit, which is quite high, just disappeared? And they're like, hey, you signed small print when you logged onto our app that we could cancel your account at any time for any reason. There's a lot of apps that do that. Online games, online dating, the fine print is there of like, we don't have to have an appeal process. We can just say this isn't your account anymore for reasons and you're done. And you could have a lot of money on file. Like, would you like that? That there's no consumer protection to keep that from happening?
No.
And would you like it if there's some kind of like dishonesty and how it came out of like the line changed, but you're like, I thought I put money on this bet, but it turned into this. And they're like, yeah, sometimes there's a shift in our data and we can go back and correct it. You'd be like, oh no, I bet on this. I would like my winnings for what I bet on. You don't have any protection there because it's unregulated.
Right.
So certainly the people that are wanting to not have regulation are saying, well, I just don't want regulation in ways that are going to throttle me from being able to gamble the way I want. And I want to also appeal to their sense of justice, that they're going to want protections about how their money is handled. I think we all have that story about how we ordered something online and went through a pay service and the thing didn't arrive, and then the pay service thing didn't back us up, and we're like, oh, justice. And there have been consumer protections for things like that in the past, and those days are pretty much gone, and they're going to continue to get chiseled away of having those level of like, you're able to follow up on something where you were done dirty by an online operator like that. So I would invite those folks to join us in a seat at a table in the regulation and make sure there's regulation to keep it fair and safe for the people gambling. I think there's also a lot of talk, at least in the sports world of fixing bets, whether that's like refs or athletes. Probably NCAA athletes are going to be very prone to it because they aren't earning a lot of money in needing to get by, and it's easy to point shave and that kind of thing. And I mean, that's not fair. Like, you don't want to be betting on fixed games or have people you're betting against. I think there's probably folks that care about animals and having that workaround that many lotteries are starting to use of this isn't gambling, it's actually horse racing. I mean, can we evolve past exploiting animals for our entertainment? Are there other things? So looking at what matters to those folks that are gambling, they're not soulless. They're just wanting to pursue gambling as something they enjoy without the consequences affecting them. And it will affect them if they're living in a society where they're not having the same safeguards for themselves in doing that.
So yes, protection versus restriction. There's
That's well said. Exactly.
Yeah, I think that was well said by you.
Yeah.
Now I know there's a topic that both you and I have strong opinions on, and it is this idea of responsible gambling. For someone who has no background in this space, what is the definition of responsible gambling? And it's a trick question.
There's three different kinds.
Yeah.
There's player responsibility, there's operator responsibility, and there's regulatory responsibility. And they're all three different. And player responsibility, absolutely. I, as someone that had challenges with gambling and continue to have challenges with odds and digital and video gaming and things like that, am beholden to try as hard as I can to not have that be something that interferes with my ability to contribute to society in a meaningful way and carry out my meaning of preventing suffering. So that's my responsibility. And I'm not going to be perfect at it, but I want to always just move towards each decision I make, saying, is this moving me towards that? Is it helping? Is it harm reduction? If I'm playing a video game sometimes, does that keep me from doing other stuff that's worse?
Sure.
Like, you know, if I got into prediction markets or day trading,
Yeah.
constantly being aware of that, seeking support about it, being very vocal about it to normalize. This is something that many of us experience and many more of us will. That's my responsibility. Other people to maybe consider setting budgets and using the tools that are built into games, because we know it's the tools that are effective. It's not just that I'm going to try to set a time limit and a budget, but I'm going to have this like opt-out thing that kicks in of when I've spent this much, I'm not going to be able to play anymore, or I'm going to self-exclude at the point that I am having this experience with the gambling. Those things are very effective. And you can self-exclude for a certain amount of time. It doesn't have to be forever. Sometimes that's very effective to just slow you down, creating some friction. Operator responsibility is a tricky one because, as we discussed, their goal is to make as much money as possible. And with lotteries, they may say, like where I come from, that that has to be commensurate with the public good. So I think then we have to define public. Who's the public? Is it people just of privilege? Or is the public also, or in fact more, folks who are going to need some kind of regulatory protection because they're going to be more prone and have a disproportionate amount of harm with the gambling? And so I would say that responsible gambling on the operator's behalf is to target those individuals in a way to protect them from the harm. If we look to the opioid crisis, there's some folks that probably are just never going to have opioid use disorders. It's folks that have surgeries or bone cancer or things that are going to involve a really high level of pain management that would seem like they are going to need special care by doctors to know how much of pain medication and when to taper and what the alternatives are, and MAT if it develops. Like there's whole programs set up for that, that we've learned from that. And I would think that gambling operators would want to take a page from that book and be like, who are we meant to protect here? Many of them will pay lip service to that we want to have a lot of people play a little. But there's not much that's within their platforms that speaks to that. It much more shows we want to get people addicted by having these tricks in the games of near misses, lost disguises wins, like just kind of sleight of hand type things that happen. And that will make people chase, and it'll create a reward loop with their prefrontal cortex and their ventral striatums, where kind of like potato chips, you don't want to stop. And they know that, and so they design the games around that, and that's not protecting our more vulnerable people.
Struggling with an addiction can make you feel like you're all alone. But trust me, it doesn't have to be that way. At Right Choice Recovery, a family-owned and operated treatment center in New Jersey, we are here for you, and we're dedicated to helping you break free from addiction and change your life for the better. Whether you're struggling with substances or a gambling addiction, this is the spot for you. With personalized care, real support, and a team that understands exactly what you're going through, we're here to walk with you on your journey to recovery, because recovery is possible. And it all starts with the right choice. Check the description of this video today for more information.
So are you saying that the casinos, the gambling operators, specifically make their profits off of the addicted players?
Of course they do. I mean, the numbers are there. And if there's any operator that's not reporting that and saying, well, we can't measure that. It's anonymous play. Anyone can rock up to a machine and play it. And particularly lotteries that have slot machines, digital slot machines, there's no player loyalty card that they're tracking. So it's easy to say, yeah, we have no idea who's actually gambling on those machines and where the money's coming from. And in fact, I mean, that's not true. There's really quite easy ways to have a way to identify folks. Look at all the different ways we identify ourselves to ride a bus or...
They have so much plausible like deniability across everything. Do you think that applies to this gamble responsibly model as well? Like they can say, hey, we told you to do it responsibly, so it's not our fault if you didn't. Is that something that feels fair? Because that's what it feels like to me.
I want to believe that they're not just bad, that they're not deliberately trying to cause harm.
Sure.
I think they're put in a bad place. That, I mean, do you think Big Sugar is like, no, this is actually I don't know, is sugar carcinogenic? I think it's probably really bad for you.
It's not good for you.
I know alcohol is. You know, is big alcohol being like, by the way, this is going to kill you, and like in a bad way. So they probably do want to say that, like, we know what this does, but we are tasked with marketing this product within the regulations that are there. And so that kind of brings us back to the third kind of RG, which is regulatory, which is on the public that puts people in office to represent us to then sponsor bills that are thoughtfully created by folks that may or may not want regulated, but don't want their accounts frozen or the mafia running. I mean, all the different things that could go sideways without having any kind of regulation, and have them be participants in creating some kind of regulations to have some kind of protections for folks.
Sure. It feels like the average politician kind of just hears this thing, gambling, can bring money to your budget. Is there, truth to that? And if so, like, what's the opposite side of the coin look like in that case? Is there damages being brought with it that are measurable financially?
They're very measurable, and it's of course challenging because it's like, I think of it as like when you buy a company and there's a price on goodwill. How do you price that? How do you put a number to goodwill? So how do you put a price to harm? Because we know things like that when someone develops a gambling disorder, it doesn't just affect them, it affects several other people outside of them. I don't know, 10, it depends. But their children aren't having a good time if the parent is addicted, and that's going to create attunement issues that is going to repeat a cycle of that kid growing up needing to have mechanisms to have a good life, and rinse repeat kind of thing. So we can put some kind of value to the harm of those people that the gambling is happening. There's also ways to look at just the financial number, and there's different equations that are out there that are like pretty complicated, but that can grind out a number, and it hasn't been done in some time that I've seen, of what the dollar amount per person with addicted gambling is going to result in loss to a society. And I would call for research to be sponsored by the government to look at, like, what is that number now? How much does each person with an addiction to gambling cost the community? And not to further stigmatize the person, but to make it be like, yeah, we have to do something about this, because that's going to bring us all down, that number.
Another aspect of that number is probably, because I've seen estimates that it's like, I think it's $14 billion is an annual social cost because of problem gambling.
In the US?
Yeah, but like, if you think about kind of where's that amount centralized, right? So say, this is completely off the top of my head, say $8 billion is from New York City, and 10 million is from the lowest income town in New York. That 8 billion spread across the residents of New York City might not have as strong of an impact as that 10 million does in that small community that's struggling. So like, the numbers are even relative there. So if we did come up with a big number that said this is the annual social cost, I think it's great for like framing and for making an argument, but a small amount in one community might destroy it, whereas a big community can kind of absorb that, and it's not the end of the world in terms of what the politicians think.
And that's what is especially concerning right now. We are at an absolute precipice in deciding what we're doing here as a society. Like, who matters? How do we define our worth? Is it just this colonial, your worth is how much money and property and prestige and entitlement and stuff you have? Because kind of seems like that's the direction we're going, and that non-regulation of gambling is going, whereas the individuals that are not in Manhattan but in more rural areas, and we can even look at things like how we vote for presidential office, or like having an electoral college where representation from more rural areas is. And what it comes down to is saying, see those folks over there that are suffering more gambling harm? They don't matter. And it's frankly over ableism, it's over racism, it's othering groups of people, veterans, older adults, younger adults, people with any kind of disabilities, any BIPOC individuals. There's a list of folks that are suffering more gambling harm, and we're saying that's okay, that doesn't matter. We want their money because that behooves the privileged people.
Men and women typically experience gambling problems in different ways. That's what I've kind of come to the conclusion of in conversations, in other interviews that I've done. Of course, there's similarities, but there's certain things that are just distinctly different. Would you be willing to speak a little bit from your experience as to what makes gambling harm unique for women?
Sure. So, I mean, I can even like weave in some of my story to it. Women are, to generalize, somewhat socialized to acquiesce to social norms. Like, we tend to be willing or put in a position to be helpers and givers and do a lot of mental loading, and we've had a lot of unpaid labor, and we've had to have dual roles now in our current economy of both working outside the home and inside the home. I think there's been studies that women tend to do like an additional 40 some hours of unpaid labor within families and stuff like that. And so we're kind of mad, you know, like a lot has been asked of us, and we haven't had a lot of protection from it in terms of regulatory things, if that's wages or equal opportunities in terms of being able to take time off to raise kids. In Australia, you get you get a bucket of money for having a kid, and both parents get a ton of time off to go be with a kid. And in America, you get like not your job anymore and not to be on a career path. So it's definitely affecting women, and depending on the age, just our sense of quality of life. And that can be that after kids leave the house and some of the things that were meaningful to us aren't there anymore, that there's this kind of like emptiness of what's for me, and with the accessibility being there, that makes us particularly vulnerable. I am around a lot of women who do not feel like physically safe. We can't just go for a run at night, or we have to make decisions around where we go and how we are and what we're freaking wearing, kind of things, that we are not protected. I mean, if you look at how many women out there have experienced some kind of sexual assault, and how many of them have had that brought to justice, the difference in those numbers is staggering. So to generalize again, many women either feel unsafe out in their communities and will want to stay in where we can gamble online, digitally, in our own comfort, something to feel good. Or sometimes women can go to casinos in areas where there's lots of casinos or bars that have gambling, that at least there's people around and some kind of protection, that there's bouncers or something like that. So I've seen that it's an activity women can do to just bring in some kind of way to fill the time that meets their needs, of feeling some kind of status that they're missing now, or some kind of joy, or some kind of fun, or some kind of hope that they haven't been able to. How many of us have been able to have the American dream of buying a home and having a retirement, blah, 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 all the things? That's more difficult as time goes on. And that seems to be a path that many of the women I've been around, when they're going to be exposed to more of the digital online prediction market type things, and the quick and fast, what's the next thing that's going to happen that you can bet on immediately, they're going to be very prone to finding just some kind of emotional, like, that felt good. And it might be different than men's, that could be more tied to sports that they're brought up with, and it's kind of in their, starting to become part of their DNA, that those get tied together. And that can be very like action oriented, has been something that they've studied in the past, of which one is more escapey and which one's action. I find that like bet on action to escape, so winning, both. So I don't know, I mean, it's going to be different for everyone, but I also think that, I don't know, just as a segue, I saw something recently of like why lesbians drive Subarus.
Oh.
Do you know why?
I don't.
Do you think that's true?
I don't know. You said it was a study. I said sure.
I mean, in Oregon, we have a lot of Subarus. And so it turns out it is true. And it was very specific that there was a time where Subaru was trying to like make its way in marketing their product and differentiating. And they were like, we're all about the outdoors. And they started breaking it into segments of people that like to be outdoors, and people that are independent, and women that buy cars on their own. And they segmented that off. And they eventually found that this is a group in the population that meets some of these characteristics, and it turns out that might also be gay women, and let's specifically target them to buy Subarus, and it worked, and they did. And I think that's what operators are going to do as well, that they're going to find ways to campaign to lots of different demographics by pushing our pain button of, are you missing your kids? Well, here's an online game where you can adopt furry little critters that you bet on or something. And that might be where the pain point is, that meets what those operators are needing to do to make their revenues. And there's lots of those untapped markets, but none of them are going to be going after people who are less vulnerable. They're going to go after the more vulnerable people first. Don't you think?
Absolutely. I think that a common thing that's talked about in kind of the 14 to 24 demographic is like this male loneliness epidemic, kind of fueled by increased use of social media, but also like if you look at dating apps, like 20% of people get 80% of the volume, and it's kind of that split. So there's 80% of people that are feeling like very isolated, very frustrated, and so something like gambling, sports betting, steps in, and it's like, here's a solution to your feeling of meaninglessness, your feeling of boredom, your feeling of financially being behind. We can solve all that with one parlay, and I think it's that kind of marketing that's been most effective and kind of changed the narrative about gambling.
And like it or not, we do have some kind of social mores that is that men are the breadwinners, or if you're a man in a household, it's beholden upon you to be a provider, to provide for your family. And that is increasingly difficult these days. I mean, I have a close friend who's been very high level at a high-tech place for decades that was just laid off and has a lot of overhead for the things in his family's life of, his wife running a nonprofit and him supporting that and taking care of an older adult relative and stuff. And it's like, now what? Like, that is a lot of pressure. So I can see men also having that outright panic of, what am I going to do to provide? I have got to be able to make a pretty considerable amount of money, and it has that false sense of hope. I mean, I see on your live streams and comments from trolls of like, you got to play to win, and if you don't play, you won't win. Don't give up on it, kind of thing. I think they probably actually believe that to some degree, that like their ship is going to come in if they just keep investing in the gambling. And it's so hard to do the math of like, no, seriously, nobody's winning except the operators.
Right. I think that it's even easier to see that at lower earning thresholds. Yeah. Because like the jobs that I used to work when I was, 21, 22, I was like driving pizza, right? Yeah. So if I needed $200, that might take 2 to 3 days driving pizza, but it might take one click if I bet $200. It might, being the key word, of course, but when you are backed up against the wall, there's so many people, and they'll be watching this, that believe their only way out is some kind of financial windfall, and gambling seems to be the easiest way. I'm sure that the average person that's kind of up against the wall like that, the average young man would probably like to do crypto or stock trading. Yeah. But this idea of one click of a button and it's done, or it's worse, it's almost becoming an appealing option because of how difficult it is to earn at lower thresholds.
Yeah, and that's why I kind of want to say to those folks, like, no, you are the backbone of this country. Thank you for contributing by doing those really low-paid, laborious jobs, and please keep doing that and working your way up and having success at it. And the narrative needs to change of not like you could win big, but more like, do you want to be a chump? Like, does that feel good that you have fallen for like over nonsense that you've been spoon-fed? Does that, when you log on and you do crypto or day trade or prediction markets or parlays or whatever someone's thing is, you should probably feel a little embarrassed to tell people that, because they are playing you. Yeah. And I don't say that in any way to stigmatize the people that are experiencing that. I am 100% on their side, but the idea that there's any kind of like glamour or this is a way out or this could work is wrong. This is really just, you're falling for nonsense. And if you try it and you're like, I just lost a lot right there, that sucked, I'm not going to do that again. Like, lock that in, buddy. Like, that's the thought you should be having. But they know that, and so they make a win happen, and that's when it locks it of like, oh, this could be something that I could actually be successful at. I could be a professional gambler. We all remember our first win, and we're chasing that dragon. And so if we could speak to those people of like, guess what, that was great that that happened. That was a one-off. That is not going to happen regularly. That was built into the whole model to get you to think it was going to continue to happen, and like, don't fall for it. Like, let's keep talking about that.
Yeah. I think what feeds into that is that people think there are good and bad gamblers, in sports betting at least. If that exists, inherently you can become a good one. I don't think it exists. I think everyone's just a gambler, and you eventually just follow whatever the statistics of the game is.
That's a really dangerous part of it when you think there's some sense of skill. And what it also does when we talk about like robbing our productivity is folks that get into the sports part think that they can get a strategic advantage by watching the pregame and just the folks that are commenting on it. I've heard that there's even on some networks like a little thing of like, what's the chance that they're going to get the first down here down in the corner, that they're pretty soon going to like monetize just betting on having these tools that are built in there. And it's really concerning that it's making it so easy for that to happen.
Yeah. And I mean, the next natural step of that is like, okay, so one thing that you're talking about is like Apple TV. They'll have the probability in the corner. So then it goes to being able to bet with one click in the corner. But then why stop at sports? Apple TV has Severance, great show. Would highly recommend anyone to watch it. But what's to stop the live premiere of episode 1 of season 3 of Severance from being, will Mark leave the building or will he go back with Helly? What's stopping them from putting a button in the corner saying one or the other? It becomes a prediction market on the screen. I think that's kind of the natural flow of where we're heading.
Yeah, and even like the easier that is, we don't want to have someone have to pause the show and go make a deposit. So let's just like tie that right into their checking account. While we're at it, they may need a line of credit, so we should probably put their mortgage like tied into that has a line of credit against it and that kind of thing. And why click a button? Why not just blink or think it? Like, it's gonna get that systematized.
This video was produced as part of a larger series where we looked at what will happen to gamblers in America if nothing changes about the direction that we're headed. So here's episode 1 of that. Check it out next. Let's keep getting better together, one day at a time.